Tuesday. It is Tuesday, January 10th, the 10th day of the year, of course. The 355 days left in 2023. And welcome to another edition of Tuesdays with Thom. And it's good to have everyone back. You know, we took a little time off. New year, new ideas, new perspectives. I look forward to a great new year with you and Tuesdays with Thom. Last year was busy, somewhat hectic, and a good year for us here at 2WT. I hope all of you had a good year as well, and I wish you a great 2023. For some, the holiday season was a season of change. Moving on to new ideas and new adventures, we want to wish all who experienced change in their lives or whose life remained the same, we want you to have a wonderful 2023. A gifted year with blessings and joy, and as mentioned earlier, many new and exciting adventures. Change can be good for the soul, so embrace it. It's been a great few weeks. I hope you all enjoyed all the good food, the football, and each other. We enjoyed the holidays and the days off, but now it's time to get back to work. So football, loved playing it. And yes, it is a violent game, and that was exemplified by the injury to Damar Hamlin. In my years of playing football, watching football, coaching football, I've never seen anything like the injury to Damar. But isn't it great that he is making a recovery, the miracle of modern medicine? The national championship game. What can I say? I checked out at 31-7. I didn't think they could come back, and obviously they didn't. Our G-List guest today is Andy Burcham. He is a director of broadcast operations and voice of the Auburn Tigers with Auburn Sports Properties. We look forward to talking with him today. And I want to say congratulations to my good friend, Thom Demick. Thom's been with us on the show. You may remember both he and his wife were on it several times. Thom does hair in Hollywood, and he's been doing it for a long time. I met Thom on In the Heat of the Night some 30-some odd years ago. We worked on In the Heat of the Night. Then we worked on Miss Evers' Boys together. And we worked again on a show called City of Angels in Los Angeles. Thom just booked a job. He's going to spend a couple of weeks in Atlanta, and then he's off to London for 2 to 4 weeks. So congratulations, man. All right, I'm proud of you. Okay, let's see where we are now. So let's go to this edition of Tuesday of Thom, of course, is sponsored by our partners, the Best Girl Consulting Firm. Let me go back and say that Andy is our G-List guest. He's Director of Broadcast Operations, voice of the Auburn Tigers, Auburn Sports Properties. So Best Girl has been providing customized solutions to executive issues for 34 years. Let's hear from Best Girl.
Best Girl is a consulting firm that provides customized leadership, access and inclusion, public relations, communications, and organizational consulting services. Clients include Fortune 500 companies, utilities, higher education institutions, small businesses, and associations. Best Girl's team of consultants, led by Joyce Gilly-Gossam, Emily Hedrick, and Sean Jones, partners with business and education clients to promote organizational effectiveness, communication, motivation, and leadership, with always an impact on the bottom line. Best Girl's customized consulting services include strategic planning, corporate communication, executive coaching, fundraising, and economic development.
It's a solution that fits your needs. So let's get to our roundtable regulars and introduce Barbara Wallace Edwards and Michael Walker. Good morning, Barbara Wallace Edwards and Michael Walker. How you guys doing?
Good morning, TG. Happy New Year to you. Doing well.
Happy New Year to the both of you. So I hope you guys had good holidays.
Had wonderful holidays. Thank you.
Yes.
Okay. Barbara, we got to get some of that art off your walls there. That's some beautiful stuff you got going there.
This is beautiful, beautiful art, but it doesn't belong to me. I'm at the home of my dear friends Barbara and Thom Larkin this morning due to some AT&T issues that I'm dealing with again. don't have any internet service at home. So I
Wow.
visited, they invited me to come over and do the show from their home. And they have beautiful artwork all throughout their house. It's like walking into an art museum.
Well,
So we'll have to get them on the show one day and talk about all their art pieces. They've got
it'd be
a
great. I'd
wonderful
love to do
collection.
that. So
Yes.
I love, I follow AT&T stock, and I can see why they don't do it. They don't do very well. It
I know
doesn't do
you and
very
Michael
well.
worked with the company a long time ago, and they need you back because I promise you, they're making mistakes on top of mistakes. I transitioned from one TV service to another, all within the AT&T family, and instead of just making the transition, they canceled all of my old service, and my new service won't be available until Wednesday. So,
Oh
here I
my
am with
goodness.
nothing, no TV, no internet.
That's amazing. That's amazing.
Absolutely.
They sound like whoever you were talking to is one of those people who were telling you about the rules and not trying to
Yes.
solve the issue.
Right.
The
Exactly.
rules are this is how we do it. These are the rules, and it doesn't matter that you don't have service for a couple of days, but they're
Absolutely.
still going to charge you for the full month.
And they're going to
So
charge me more than what they used to charge me. And I'm like, that was the whole reason for the transition. It's crazy. I promise you. I after this time around with them, I'm through. I'm going to find me another service to deal with.
I hear you. I hear you.
I'm not happy.
So
with
I know
AT&T.
that I joined you guys for Thursday. Barbara Miller just came on. Hey, Barbara. For the Auburn women's basketball team. And
Yes.
we won't talk about the score, but it was a lot of fun. And
We had a great time.
Barbara, you want to talk about it?
Yes, I want to thank Coach Johnny Harris and her assistant Radisha Hobbs for showing us around and inviting us to be the guest coaches for the game on Sunday afternoon between Auburn and Alabama. It was a wonderful experience. I don't know about you guys, but that's been probably one of my most fun experiences on Auburn's campus, is serving as the guest coach and having an opportunity to meet with the team and the staff before the game and address the team and going down on the floor in the third quarter. It was wonderful for me. I don't know. I hope you guys enjoyed it as much as I did.
I did. It was certainly an enjoyable experience, and it kind of took me back to the days of being at Auburn and stuff and walking around campus and stuff. And certainly enjoyed the opportunity to speak to the team before the game and try to give them a pep talk and send a message home and all of that. But the atmosphere was great and good company. Saw a lot of nice people, a lot of people I hadn't seen in a while, but it was great. Had an interesting experience. As a matter of fact, they always say Auburn is family, right? And that you always hear that, the Auburn family. And, we're standing in line to get our tickets to go in, and it started to drizzle. I put my umbrella up and I turned and I was facing you, Barbara, and Thom and Gloria. Right. And, you feel something close to you, like somebody's up under you.
Right.
I turned around. This lady had just come up under my umbrella.
I noticed that.
Before, never met.
I thought it was someone you knew at first. And then she was like, no, I just need some cover. So I just came right here and joined you.
I had never seen her before. Didn't know her. And, I turned around and there she
was again.
Yeah. So I just put my arm around and said, okay, it's enough room for both of us in here.
Right.
So that's an indication of Auburn being family.
Absolutely.
Well, it was a fun evening, and I'm glad we got to do it. So
absolutely.
So what else you guys got for the new year?
Well, Thom, you talked about it a little bit. I want to congratulate those Georgia Bulldogs on that great win last night. TC, you just didn't even show up, I don't think, bless their hearts. But I thought it was a great game for the SEC anyway. But I wish there had been more competition.
Well, I'll say, Georgia won, but I'll also remind them that in my era, we beat them 3 out of 4. So
absolutely.
I can always rest my hat on that. Michael?
Well, Thom, President Biden just signed the omnibus bill and stuff, and I was going to talk about that and what that means, but I think I'll hold off because I ran across a story that was I don't even know how to describe it, but it was so unique that I thought I would share it. You know, Virginia was the capital of the Confederacy. And for the past 3 years, they have been trying to remove these monuments that's been dedicated to the Confederacy. And in walks a man by the name of Henry, who happens to be Black. And he has overseen all of the work to remove these statues dedicated to the Confederacy, both in Virginia and North Carolina. And Henry never paid much attention to civil rights history, nor the removal of statues. He didn't even ask for this job, but he got the job after a long list of bigger, well-known white-owned contractors refused to be a part of removing Confederate statues. And as a result, Team Henry was tasked with doing so. And just imagine, he has endured death threats, seen his employees walk away, been told by others that his future in the industry is ruined. He started having to wear a bulletproof vest on job sites and got a permit to carry a concealed firearm for protection. You know, it interrupted his careful thoughts, and he always was very guarded with his company, Team Henry Enterprises. He wouldn't give any interviews, refused to be on television. And he's removed 24 monuments in Virginia and North Carolina. And Henry, age 45, has become more comfortable in his role, enabling him to be involved with history reckoning on a social injustice platform. But the death threats remain. He's just gotten more comfortable.
Oh, wow.
That's incredible.
That is
you
incredible.
talk about, well, let's take those statues down. Let's do this. But you don't really realize the implications of all that.
Right.
And all the people who are involved. That's he can take them down and not even agree with the fact that he's taking them down. That's his job. That's what he does.
Right.
So who knows? Another story that came up, the 6-year-old boy who shot his teacher.
Yes.
I don't know if you guys saw that one, but
I did.
6 years old, he shot his teacher, and they specifically pointed out that it wasn't an accident. He intended to shoot her, and over some altercation.
Whatever adult is in his home need to be charged with something, because a 6-year-old can't go out and buy a gun. They made it accessible for him. So hopefully, not only would this child get some type of counseling or something, but the parents or whoever adults in charge should also receive some type of treatment as well. It's crazy.
Punishment. Shit.
Yes, that's right.
I just, I think, and we've had this conversation, and I think, Michael, you said it, but I know that my dad had a shotgun in our house that his dad had given to him. And we knew where it was, but there were specific instructions to never go in that closet.
Right. And
play with, see how it works, or anything regarding that shotgun.
Right.
Yeah.
My dad, back in the day, people would shoot on New Year's Eve. You shoot out the old, you bring in the new kind of thing. And we had woods behind our house, so we could shoot in the woods. And my dad shot that thing. I think I was about 12, 13, somewhere like that. And I said, Daddy, let me shoot it. Let me shoot it. He said, no, you don't want to shoot it. The thing's got too big a kick. I said, no, I want to shoot it. I shot that thing, boy. It threw me up against the house. And, he said, you want to shoot again? I said, that's okay. That was my only time having any involvement with that shotgun. So,
and my dad always had one in the house. He kept it mounted on the wall, but we knew not to ever touch it. I mean, there were 6 of us, and I don't recall any of us ever even going near it, trying to touch it. So, let alone trying to shoot it.
Yeah,
I just knew that wasn't acceptable.
Yeah. I agree with you all. I grew up in a house. My grandfather had about 3 rifles or shotguns, 410, 12 gauge, and I don't know, 22, everything. But I knew that they were not to be played with.
Right.
And I think the best compliment that I received was when I was attending a session with my son, and the counselor asked my son if I had a gun. And he said, no, my daddy never had a gun in the house. And I said, well, you're wrong. I did. I had a 45 in the house when you and your sister were little, but you didn't know about it. You never saw it. And it was out of sight, And I said, you don't go around bragging on the fact that you have a gun and putting it out there for people to see. So I was trying to teach him about responsibility of gun ownership. And for him to say that I didn't have a gun because he never saw it was a great compliment as far as I was concerned.
Well, and that double barrel shotgun I talked about earlier, I still have it. It's mine. It was passed down.
Wow.
And but I haven't shot it since I was 12. So we don't have woods behind our house anymore. So
but what we're all right here talking about, what we're all talking about here is pretty interesting because of the gun laws now. And you think about all the political wrangling going back and forth about guns and people having access to gun and concealed carry permits and being able to go out in public with it. I think that if people just implemented responsible gun ownership, we wouldn't have these problems. We're 3 people that just sat here and grew up as kids with guns in the house, but we never shot anybody. We never thought about taking a gun to school to shoot somebody. We knew that was off limit, and it was for a specific purpose, which was self-defense. That was it, pure and simple. So what happened to that? Where did we lose that we have 6-year-olds and all these kids that less than 20 that's getting killed by guns now?
Yeah, the parenting is there's something wrong with that right now. In the state of Alabama, laws just changed, I think January 1st, the open carry law. So they don't have to have them concealed any longer. They're going to be much more visible to children. And, to me, that's just going to cause more and more problems. And we may see more situations where children are taking guns to school, and that is sad.
Well, when the governor takes out a purse and pulls out a gun in a campaign ad, that says how we feel about guns, but it also says where our politics are. And our politics is in the gutter in a lot of cases.
Yes.
I don't know if you saw that debacle about the Speaker of the House thing. That was kind of.
It's like a circus.
I'll just say it was an interesting circus.
It wasn't a fun one.
No, it wasn't. It wasn't even fun to watch. Matter of fact, we were sitting there watching it, and my wife says, "Man, this is the most interesting stuff on television."
They were showing a video clip of it, and the caption read, "This is not Saturday Night Live skit. This is real life." Yeah.
Anyway, well, good morning, Becky Davis. Good morning, Gloria Owens. Becky Davis Gibson, I'm sorry. Gloria Owens, Anthony Tedeschi, Antley, of course, Barbara Miller, and others. We want to just say good morning and Happy New Year to you, and thanks for joining us this morning. And either one of you guys got anything else? Michael, Barbara?
No, that's all I have. Thank you.
Okay, well, we're going to move on then. So let's go to Sean. Sean has got a minute for us. Sean Tia Jones, and got a minute.
Good morning. My name is Shantia Jones, and this is Got a Minute. Happy New Year to everyone joining in with us this morning. We're already 10 days into 2023, and I have some awesome news for anybody who wants to retire richer. Now, There's a silver lining to this year's high inflation for retirees and avid savers. Starting in this month, Social Security recipients will get an 8.7% boost, and that's the largest increase in 40 years. The typical beneficiary will see their check swell from $146 to $1,827. Meanwhile, employees who save for their retirement can now contribute up to $22,500 a year, or almost 10% more than they could in 2022. Now, over 25 years, saving that additional $2,000 a year in your 401k could easily pad your nest egg by an extra $120,000 or more when you're ready to quit the work race for good. Thank you all for joining in. My name is Shantia Jones, and this is Got a Minute.
Thank you, Sean. I'm ready. I don't know about all those numbers, but I'm ready. So our G-List guest today is Andy Burcham, the voice of the Auburn Tigers and the man behind the Talking Tigers podcast. Andy is, Andy is from a town, I got to ask him about this, Nashville, Illinois. And his goal in life was to be a broadcaster along the lines of Harry Carey and Jack Buck. Under his senior portrait in high school, he listed to be the voice of the St. Louis Cardinals. So let's get Andy Burcham on here. Andy, good morning. How are you?
Thom and Barbara, Michael, great. I'm glad to be with you today. I'm doing very, very well. Talking to you from a hotel room in Oxford, Mississippi, where Auburn plays tonight.
Oh man, I hear you. That's interesting. We were talking earlier about Oxford, and we got to play a couple of games over in Oxford. So to be the voice of the St. Louis Cardinals is where you thought you were headed, huh?
Yeah, I grew up, as you mentioned, Thom, I grew up in Nashville, Illinois. It's a small farming community about 50 miles southeast of St. Louis. And I grew up in a time when the Cardinals, they were my Auburn of my youth. And the Cardinals in the 60s won 2 World Series championships and played in another. And I grew up listening to Harry Carey and Jack Buck. And after the Cardinals won the 1967 World Series against the Red Sox, my father brought home an album. Remember, we all had albums back then. There was no CDs or digital or anything like that. And it was an album of the Cardinal highlights for the 1967 season, featuring those 2 Hall of Fame broadcasters. And I listened to that over and over and over again. And truthfully to tell you, at that point, I knew what I wanted to do with my career was become a broadcaster, become a radio man. And at the time, I didn't know anything about Auburn. So the Cardinals were my goal through high school, and then went to college, and my career brought me to Auburn in 1988, where I've been ever since. So I've led a blessed life and thrilled to be here now.
You came to Auburn expecting to spend a couple of years. You said, I'll spend a couple of years here, and then I'll move on to something else. What kept you there these other 29 years? Yeah,
that's an interesting question. I was newly married at the time, and my then wife was we were coming to Auburn so she could get her PhD in counseling psychology, which she did. She's from the Chicago area, and she always wanted to move back, and it took a little bit longer for her to get that degree. And by that time, I was pretty involved with my career in radio in Auburn, and from the beginning, I did women's basketball. I was the voice of Auburn women's basketball, which honored the 3 of you the other day. I did that for 31 years under Joe Champy and Nell Fortner and Coach Flo, Terry Williams-Flournoy, and just really enjoyed that. And then, of course, back in 2019, after the tragic passing of Rod and Paula Bramlett, that I moved into the role that Rod had for quite some time. And listen, my first wife and I eventually divorced. She moved back to Chicago. By this point, I had made Auburn my home. And then I married another Auburn gal who's from Alabama. And this is our home. I've lived in the Auburn Opelika area longer than I've lived anywhere else. So I still love Illinois. I still love my hometown, and I still have family there. But Auburn is home. And I was listening to you guys talk about home, and I do a lot of interviews, and Thom has been gracious enough to be on my podcast 2 or 3 times, I think 3 times. And we talk about, and Thom, I mean, you were at Auburn, and you're one of the more unique guests that I've had on the show with regard to your career at Auburn. But it is a home. It is home. And you listen to the kids now. They are kids, aren't they? I mean, they're kids compared to me, that's for sure. But you listen to them now talk about their recruitment. And they talk about, they come to Auburn and it's home. It feels like home to them. And I can't put my finger on exactly what that is, but there's no denying the feeling that folks get when they come to this town, when they come to this community, when they come to this campus. And for many, they'll move away, and then a lot of them come back. So it's an incredibly unique campus to be a part of, and I'm just so thrilled to be a part of it.
When I was, my dad grew up outside of Wetumpka, Alabama, and they were sharecroppers. And when my dad and my mom drove me to Auburn for the first time, they had never been. I decided this is where I wanted to go, and so on and so forth. They let me make the decisions and all that. And back then, when you got off 85 and took a left to go to campus, and you're riding, and on the left, there's nothing but farmland and cows and so on and so forth. And my dad says, "Damn, boy, this is like where I grew up." I said, "Well, there's actually a few buildings down here, Dad." Who's got a question for Andy?
I'll start. Andy, one of the things I wanted to ask you about is what I call the favoritism or the homer in broadcast, the broadcasting of the games now. And, I have a background in radio and TV. And as a matter of fact, one of your colleagues, Paul Ellen, and we used to broadcast Auburn High basketball, where I played basketball at Auburn High. And when I got to Auburn, I started doing that while I was studying radio and TV. And Paul and I used to do those broadcasts. But back in that time, as a broadcaster, you tried to be objective and then show any favoritism, even if you were like myself, an alumni of Auburn High, and I'm broadcasting Auburn High School basketball. I was trying to be objective in my color analysis. Nowadays, it seems like broadcasters kind of tend to be a little bit more on the homer side of it. Do you feel that? And is that a part of it now in order to get the people that are engaged in the game to be more engaged?
Michael, I think this, and everything that I talk about when it comes to this, it always goes back to me as a kid and listening to those Hall of Fame broadcasters. And I grew up listening to Harry Carey and Jack Buck, Dan Kelly, and they were all on KMOX radio in St. Louis. And Dan Kelly was the longtime voice of the St. Louis Blues hockey team. And you knew who they were broadcasting to. You knew they were broadcasting to Cardinal fans. You knew they were broadcasting to St. Louis Blues fans. And I think folks know where I wear Auburn gear almost every day. And if you listened to Gary Sanders, listen to Gary Sanders call the punt Bama punt.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
There's no question who Gary's broadcasting to at that point. Listen to Eli Gold broadcasting for Alabama or whomever. You know who they're broadcasting for. And I think this, And it at times has probably gotten the best of me in a game because I want Auburn to win. I do.
Right.
I want Auburn to win this game tonight.
Right.
But here's the thing. I think you've got to be objective enough to realize and to know when someone else on the other team makes a very good play and give them the credit for being a very good athlete or making a terrific play. As painful as that may be to Auburn at the time. I don't say we and they. I guess if there's a line that I draw, that's where I draw the line. Sonny Smith, who was, of course, a legend as a coach and as a broadcaster, does say we and they, but he was also Auburn's coach.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, if a former Auburn player who's on our broadcast says we and they, I understand it. I mean, Thom, you played at Auburn. If you did games with us and you said we and they, I would understand. So I guess if there's a line to draw, that's where I draw the line. But I do think in this day and age now, when every game is televised, Michael, you can see just about every game on TV now, as opposed to when Thom was playing. How many times were you on TV, Thom, when you were playing? Once or twice a year? Yeah.
Yeah, maybe 3 at the most.
Right. I think Auburn fans want to know that the person calling their game is an Auburn person. But it doesn't mean that you're just so slanted in how you call it that you cannot give credit when credit is due to somebody else. I guess that's the best way I know how to describe it at this point.
Yeah.
You said something. I was reading an article from the Montgomery Advertiser about you, and you said something about setting the scene. In other words, if you're on the radio, they can't see the game, so you have to set a vision for them for that game. And growing up, you're right, we were on maybe 3 times a year, but everybody listened to the radio broadcast, man. That's where they got it. And man, one of the games I specifically remember is Auburn and LSU. We'd had a storm, and I had a tree down on my roof, and we were out here trying to get the tree off the house and had the radio on. Didn't have any power, so we had a radio with batteries, and we had it sitting on the roof as we were listening to the game. And I think it was Jason Campbell threw that touchdown at the end of the game, and Auburn won the game. And man, you could see that game through that radio broadcast, and it was just they did a fantastic job.
I remember one day sitting down with legendary Jim Fife, and we were in Starkville, Mississippi. And at the time, Jack Crystal was still the legendary play-by-play man, the voice of the Mississippi State Bulldogs. And Jim talked about, and Jim and I talked a lot of broadcasting, talked a lot of radio, and just how did he handle different situations. And he talked about how much he admired Jack Crystal because Jack Crystal could set the scene in a pregame, the setting of the game, the bands, the colors on the field, the weather, just and when he said that, then I listened to Jim do the same thing during the broadcast, the Auburn broadcast. And Jim didn't have to take a back seat to anybody. Jim did the same thing. And it's and one day after I got the job with Auburn as the voice, and after Rod and Paula passed away, Eli Gold and I became pretty good friends. Eli was at the hospital that night that Rod and Paula passed away in Birmingham. He came to Rod and Paula's memorial service at Neville Arena. And so I would just pick up the phone from time to time and just talk to Eli. And I said, I was driving around town one day, early on a Saturday. Alabama played early and Auburn played late. And I was listening to Eli talk about how the Alabama came out on the field. The band was on the field. And how well he did that. And so I called him the next week. I said, Eli, tell me what goes through your mind when you're setting that scene. And he said, I try to say everything that I see at that point. And listen, I've been in this business a long time, and I've done high school and college, and we can never stop learning, ever. We can never stop learning, and we can learn from folks that have been doing it longer. We can learn from folks that are brand new. And I vividly remember that conversation with Jim that day, and talking with Eli. Rod and I talked radio all the time. Well, how would you handle this? And one of the things last week, and we were all just captivated by what happened to the Buffalo Bills player on Monday Night Football.
Yes.
And one of the things I watched that night, though, was how ESPN handled that situation, how Joe Buck and Troy Aikman and the folks in the studios and all the folks that were doing it were handling that, because there's no blueprint for how you handle that. It was happening for the first time.
Yes.
And we all know that, man, one slip of the tongue and
that's right,
your career could be over.
Yeah, absolutely.
And my thought was absolutely the concern for the young man, and thank the Lord, literally thank the Lord, that he is now out of the hospital. And thank the Lord for those medical folks that were there in Cincinnati and the work that they did with him, and then into the hospital and everything. But my heart also went out to those folks that were on the air having to navigate that. And how would I have done that?
Yes.
At that point. It was a remarkable night to be watching something like that. And thankfully it has turned out well for the Buffalo Bills player at this point.
I agree with you, because there was this whole thing of where are they going to resume the game in 5 minutes?
Right.
And I don't think that those guys, I think there's Buck that may have said it. I don't think he would have said that had he not gotten some information that said, we're going to resume this game. Because at that point, nobody knew how serious it was.
Right.
But they managed to keep it cleaned it up, and moved forward. And I think once everybody understood the gravity of the situation, because I didn't see it. So when I came in, they were, everybody's gathered around him and you couldn't see anything, who knows. So having been in this situation where we had guys get hurt, nothing that, of course, that serious, but as a player, it comes to you realize, man, I could get hurt out here.
Yeah, it could have been anyone.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well,
I just thought that
it went beyond. It went beyond an injury to a football player.
Yes, it
to
did.
a life and death situation.
Yes.
For a human being. That's what it went to at that point. And folks realize that. I don't know how I would have handled it. I hope I would have handled it as well as they did.
Right.
I hope you never have to handle it.
I know.
Yes.
That was amazing.
Yes.
It really,
And
it really,
and
really
speaking
was.
of which,
Let me ask you this, Andy, just because I read in some of the information about you that you've been working since you were 6 years old. You beat me by 6 years. I didn't start till I was 12.
Well, I knew at 6 years old that I wanted to be a broadcaster. I didn't get the chance to work in any kind of radio until I was a freshman in college. And in small town Illinois, just about every small town has a radio station that broadcasts their high school football, basketball, baseball, softball, boys and girls basketball, sometimes volleyball. I mean, it's devoted to that school. And we had one of those, and the man that was the voice of Nashville high school football and basketball for a long time knew that I wanted to get into the business. And I was going to a junior college at the time, drove back and forth to a community college before I went to Indiana State. And he let me be the third man in the football booth my freshman year of college. And I was terrible. I had no idea what I was doing. And then that second year of community college, they had and high school basketball in Illinois is like high school football is in the South, in Alabama, in Auburn, Michael. You know how important it is. Now, you know how important basketball was. Did you play for Coach Tolbert?
No, I was there under Coach Chapman, as a matter of fact.
Okay.
Coach Chapman and Devaney.
Okay,
Yeah.
There you go. All right. But we all know how important high school football is in Alabama and in the South. And that's what high school basketball is in Illinois. And they had a package at this small town, this small radio station, that they would go to these really small schools on a Tuesday night to different schools and broadcast a basketball game. Well, the guy that had put that package together and sold it left the radio station. So they had no one to do the games. And they said, "Can you do basketball?" Yes, I can do basketball. Well, I had never done basketball before. I've watched it. I played it out in the driveway.
Right.
So I went to practice a couple days and just figured out what I would say, and that's how it started for me.
Wow.
So
that's great.
I was so fortunate just to get the opportunity, and then of course it turned into a career. And I talked to students on the Auburn campus a lot. And listen, this is not the way you do it, but I went to Indiana State. I had a major. I didn't have a minor. I knew exactly what I wanted to do, and I didn't have a plan B.
Yes.
Yeah, it's all I've ever done.
It's all you ever needed, Andy.
That's right. That's exactly right.
You're like Van Morrison. Van Morrison has an album, and the title of it is "No Plan B." He said, "This is what I was going to be." That is me. You know?
That was my career.
Having done some boy stuff, it's a great career. You know, it's something that's I always enjoyed. I never did it steadily like you. I did product endorsements, and one year I did Winn-Dixie for the year. And you do, man. You have to put these pictures in the people's heads so that they see what it is you're talking about. And it's a wonderful. I always enjoy doing it. So, Michael, Barbara, you got a question?
Yeah, go ahead, Barbara.
Go ahead.
I was going to ask you, Andy. I know you've been around Auburn now and involved in calling games and for over 30 years now. So, what have been some of your most memorable moments? You know, you've been doing football, basketball, baseball, women's basketball. What has been some of your favorite or memorable moments from all of these games?
You know, the first 2 years that I did women's basketball for Auburn were the last 2 years that Auburn went to the Final Four. Joe Champy, the legendary coach, was in his heyday. Right. And so my first year as the women's basketball play-by-play man, Auburn was undefeated through the regular season, ranked number 1 in the country, and got beat in the SEC tournament and got beat in the national championship game. And then the next year, Auburn went to the national championship game again. And I thought to myself, well, this is real easy.
Right.
We all know it isn't.
Right.
So those first 2 years of women's basketball, Rod and I did baseball together for 25 years. And one of the vivid memories that I have with Rod was a regional down in Tallahassee, Florida, where Auburn has played many, many times in a number of sports in the NCAA tournament. And Tim Hudson, who of course went on to star with the A's and the Braves and the Giants, won a World Series with the Giants, was on that team. And David Ross, who's the current manager of the Chicago Cubs, who grew up in Tallahassee, Florida. His mother worked for the Florida State Athletic Department, was Auburn's backup catcher and Auburn's top catcher at that point. Casey Dunn suffered a broken bone in his hand in that regional, and David Ross became the starter for Auburn. And against Florida State on a Saturday, hit a walk-off home run to beat Florida State, and that Auburn team went to the World Series. And that game is one. Last night's game reminds me of Auburn's national championship out in Glendale, Arizona. Cam Newton and beating Oregon on the walk-off field goal by Wes Byron. It was fascinating to be a part of the broadcast crew that day. And there are so many others. Last year's run to the World Series for Auburn baseball, I'll never forget. Auburn played in Corvallis, Oregon in the Super Regional. They've never lost a Super Regional in Corvallis, Oregon. And very few people gave Auburn a chance to win that Super Regional. And the team could not stay in Corvallis. It was graduation weekend, and Oregon State had not secured a hotel for the opponent.
Wow.
And so we stayed an hour and 15 minutes away, closer to Portland than Corvallis. And so we're driving back and forth. We had a Tesla, which I'd never been in an electric car before. And we had to find a place to charge it every day that we drove.
Wow.
And Auburn won the first game by a run, lost the second game, and then in the third and deciding game, and it's 50 degrees. We're in long sleeves. They have great crowds there. And Auburn jumps out to a 4-1 lead, and it's 4-3 in the seventh. And Oregon State has runners at second and third. This is their chance to take control of the game. And Auburn brought Blake Burkhalter, Auburn's closer, into the game with one out and runners at second and third in the seventh. Blake grew up in Dothan, Alabama, and Blake Burkhalter set down 8 consecutive batters.
Wow.
He got out of the seventh, he got out of the eighth, and he had the top of the order up in the ninth and set him down 1, 2, 3, and Auburn went to the World Series. So there are many, and one day I'll have a chance to look back and reflect on all of those games. But those are a couple. Those are a couple of the games, Barbara, that come to my mind.
Great, thank you.
I'd like to. When you talked about my play, the touchdown I scored against Alabama, they called it that. People still remember that, and I think one of the reasons people remember it so vividly was the radio broadcast. It was Gusty and
Gary.
What's the gentleman's name? Gary Sanders.
Yeah.
And they went on about that play for about the next 30. I mean, they just talked, and they didn't. Gary didn't have any. He didn't pretend that he was being neutral. He basically said they took this away from us. And I think that's why so many people remember it. There's been a lot of touchdowns over the years. And but I think that broadcast, and eventually it came out. You talked about people buying albums. It came out on a 45 record, the whole broadcast, the radio broadcast.
Oh, wow.
And so I guess I should thank Gary and Gusty for remembering me all these years on that touchdown.
I was talking to Gary this football season when they had the Amazins reunion, and he was the one that was responsible for putting out that album.
Yeah,
he got that together, and I don't know where he got it recorded or whatever, but he got with the folks at J&M Bookstore, and they're the ones that sold it. And that's a piece of Auburn history now because of Gary putting that together. So folks will always remember certain plays because of Gary Sanders, because of Paul Ellenmichael, your buddy and mine, because of Jim Fife, and because of Rod Bramblett, and hopefully because of me.
Yes.
One day they'll remember those calls for touchdown, kick six, for goodness sakes.
Yes.
It's the greatest ending to any athletic event ever.
Yes.
And although Rod is gone from us now, he'll always be with us for calls like that.
Yes.
Andy, I'd like to ask you a question. We have a lot of people that's listening. If you will, and it's twofold. the first part of the question is, will you let people know what goes into putting together a production for radio broadcast?
Yeah.
Because people are sitting here and they're listening and they just hear you on the air describing it. Give them an idea of what
That's
goes
it.
into that.
Well,
There it goes.
This is my 3-ring binder that I use for every broadcast that I have. And these are the score sheets for tonight's game. This is Auburn and that's Ole Miss. And I do this for football games as well. And Michael and Barbara and Thom, I put that together. I start on a football game. I will start in July starting to work on my football boards. And they're much more involved in this because there's more players.
Yes.
You know, it's offense and defense, and it's sometimes 3 and 4 deep. And different folks use different methods of putting it together. But for me, once the season gets going, I will start on an opponent on the Thursday, 10 days before the game. I'll start to put names and numbers in the board that I have. And then the Monday prior to that football game is when we get the game notes from both schools, all the stats. And Monday, I just keep, a lot of times on Monday, I keep the door to my office closed because that's an intensive day for me to start on that. And I try to be done close to it by Wednesday. And then anything else that comes up, I can make an adjustment. Basketball is different because it's sometimes 2-3 games a week. Right. So you've always got to be for me, I've always got to be working ahead. Today at some point, I'll probably start working on Auburn's game on Saturday, Mississippi State. I'll start working on that today. But different folks use different methods. Some folks like to write it out. If I did that, I would never be able to read it. So I use the computer so I can read what I do. I'm very fortunate because I've traveled with the team for basketball, and they allow me to come into film study. So I can I'll go into film study today and listen to Coach Pearl and his son Steven and Ira Bowman and Wes Flanagan give the scouting report on the other team. Right. We're there with the team, and I might take a note here or there. So they're very open about letting us do that. We talk to a lot of people. We'll talk to David Kellum tonight, who's a longtime radio voice for Ole Miss. Get a note or two from him, and we'll share something as well. So it is constant prep all the time, getting ready. And baseball is very different because you won't have your lineup until you're at the ballpark.
Right.
But there's always prep. There's always prep to do for a broadcast.
Andy, I read it in an article where you talked about one of the hardest parts of your job is time management, and talking about all of the things you're having to put together. I can see where that would be a challenge. Yes. Yeah.
Well, we do a weekly podcast that Thom has been gracious enough to be on a couple times, and so that's a weekly event. Trying to get that the hardest thing for me is just to get the guests scheduled. Mm-hmm. After that, it's easy to sit down and talk to Tom Gossam and Mike O'Neill and Coach Dye when he was alive and those folks. Mm-hmm. That's the fun part of it. It's scheduling that's the toughest. We also do Tiger Talk on Thursday nights. We've got to get ready for that. I talk to every coach in their season every week. Wow. So as soon as we're done today, I've got 2 more coaches, the men's tennis coach, Bobby Reynolds, and the gymnastics coach, Jeff Graba, to interview from this hotel room today. So I'll be asking the questions a little bit later today. And then we'll go and have practice this morning, the shoot around practice, and we'll set up our equipment for tonight and then come back here. And then we've got the scouting report and grab a bite to eat. And then before you know it, we're heading back to the arena for tonight's ball game. So, wow. Yeah.
What do you feel? What responsibility do you feel for influencing the audience? In other words, you feel Auburn gets jobbed on a call or something, and
the older I get, Tom, the older I get when it comes to the officials, And I'll admit, when I was young, man, I wore it on my sleeve. I try to be. The first year I was doing this, I was in Columbia, Missouri, and the radio voice in Columbia, Mike Kelly, and now the radio voice in Florida, Sean Kelly. The three of us all worked for the same radio station in Carbondale, Illinois. We worked for a man named Mike Reese. And the four most influential years of my radio career were those 4 years in Carbondale working for Mike Reese, who was still the radio voice for SIU Carbondale. And so Mike and I were at dinner one night at this little burger bar in Columbia, Missouri called Booch's, which is a true billiards hall, cash only, really good burgers and hot dogs. But he and I was talking to him about how officiating frustrated me so much. And Mike had worked at one time for KMOX in St. Louis and worked with Jack Buck, who is my broadcast idol. I never got it. I had a chance to meet the man one time, but Mike got a chance to talk with him. And Mike posed about the same question to Jack Buck that I was talking to Mike about. And Jack Buck said, call the game. Call the game. We all insert our opinions. But he said the most important thing was to call the game that's going on. And that stuck with me. So we have, for football, we have a laminated card that I've had them make up for me. And all it says is CTG. Call the game.
Yes.
So the older I've gotten, I'm not saying that the officials' calls don't frustrate me still. I try not to let it become a big part of the broadcast as I once did. But I feel that I am the reporter calling the game. But you also know who pays the bills for this reporter, and you know what gear I'm wearing for that game as well.
I'd like to ask you, you talked about the St. Louis Cardinals. How many times did you get to see Bob Gibson pitch?
He's my all-time favorite Cardinal. All-time favorite Cardinal is Bob Gibson, who was from Omaha, Nebraska, went to Creighton University, was a fabulous athlete. He was on the Harlem Globetrotters for a while. He was a great basketball player.
Wow.
Yes.
I didn't know
But
that.
but a fierce competitor. I've heard Tim McCarver, who was his catcher for a number of years with the Cardinals. McCarver walked out one day while Gibson, pitched a complete game every time he pitched.
Mm-hmm.
And Gibson was struggling this day, and McCarver walked out, and Gibson stopped him from coming to the mound. And he said, Tim, the only thing you know about hitting is you can't do it. Or no, he said, the only thing you know about pitching is you can't hit it. You go back and get behind the plate. And that was Bob Gibson, who was just a fabulous. He is my all-time favorite Cardinal. I have a statue, a small bobblehead statue of Bob Gibson in my office. There's nobody better.
That's awesome.
You could.
I had one chance to meet him too.
Okay.
Had a chance to shake his hand. One of the highlights of my career.
Back then, you could get games from St. Louis on the radio, even in Birmingham.
Right.
And my dad
It's
would listen to Bob.
Yeah, it's a 50,000 clear watt station at night. You can hear KMOX all over the country. Yeah.
All right. Well, anything else? Andy, man, we certainly appreciate it.
Thanks for coming.
It's been
We
great.
enjoyed you.
My pleasure. I'm so happy
Thank
to
you
be able
so
to be on with you.
Any man that knows Bob Gibson's all right with me.
Absolutely.
I remember that story about him telling the catcher, "Where you going?" He was coming out to, don't come out here.
That's right.
Thank you so much, Andy. Have a great
My
game
pleasure.
tonight.
Thank
My
you.
pleasure. War Eagle.
War Eagle.
War Eagle.
War Eagle. All right. Okay. All right. Well, I'm going to close it out here with my closing commentary, or as I see it. We talked a little bit about the school shooting, but I spoke earlier about change and how we have to embrace change rather than fight against it. Change comes to all of us, and it came to a couple of good friends of mine this past Christmas holidays. But change allows us to see life in a different prism, a different looking glass. I remember embracing a new way of life in 1987. And I'm going to get to meet my former boss this week, and I'm looking forward to it. But in 1987, I worked for him at Bell South Services, and I decided to embrace a new way of life by leaving my good corporate job and pursuing what eventually became Best Girl and what has grown into TWT. I remember having this talk with my parents and informing them of my decision. I remember how sure I was that this was the thing that I wanted to do. This was the right path. And that was 36 years ago. Along the way, there have been many consulting jobs. There have been many acting and writing opportunities and many new friends. I have worked geographically all across the country of Canada, all across this country, but I was never afraid of the moment, never afraid of change. I embraced the new opportunities. I embraced the new people in my life. Many of the people I've known in my previous life are still my friends. We still share many memories and adventures. As a matter of fact, I'm having lunch with my old boss on this Thursday, and I look forward to it. We haven't seen each other in a while. He and I have maintained a friendship over these years. And of course, you see, I smile when I think about him because I learned so much from this man. So much about dealing with executives and how to deal with executives and how to get things done in the corporate structure. And when it came time for me to change our relationship, he embraced that change. Things change, but we can't be ever afraid of that change. And that is how I see it on this January 10th in the year 2023. That's our show for today. I want to thank the audience for being with us. Thank you guys for coming back to us after 3 weeks. We appreciate it. I want to thank our G-List guest, Andy Burcham. It was great talking to Andy. I could talk to Andy for a couple more hours just about radio broadcasts. I want to thank our sponsor, Best Girl Inc. Thank Michael, Barbara, Emily, and Joyce, Sean, Emily and Joyce, who have all been with us from the beginning. Emily was our communicator, or should I say, Emily and Jay are having a baby boy. And we're so happy for them. Emma's been with us for 5 years. At TWT, we're all happy for him and feel as though we all share in this wonderful moment. Thanks, Shantia Jones, the organizer and producer of the show and Got a Minute. Shantia keeps us all on track. She just completed her 2nd year with us at Best Girl. Geographically, she lives the furthest from the group. When virtual work came about, we were already doing that, and we do that on the show because Barbara's in Birmingham, Michael's in Atlanta, and Shantia is in Boca Raton. Shantia keeps us all. She just completed her 2nd year with us. Geographically, she lives the furthest, but that doesn't make any difference because we're all virtual. She and her son Kai live in Boca Raton. Sean has announced that she is going back to school to get her degree, and we're proud of her for that. And that's it on this January 10th in the new year. Let's all have a great new year. Remember, enjoy yourself. Make every day count. Stay safe. Peace.